February 14th, 1943, Solomon Islands, South Pacific. Lieutenant James Swett climbed into the cockpit of his F4U Corsair that Valentine's Day morning and found a bullet hole in his parachute. Someone had been there before him. The previous pilot never came back. Now the aircraft was his. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine rumbled to life beneath him, all 18 cylinders growling like a caged animal. He didn't know it yet, but in less than 3 hours, he would shoot down 7 Japanese aircraft in a single mission and ditch his burning Corsair into the sea. He would survive, but something inside him would not. The chance-fought F4U Corsair was not supposed to be beautiful. It was supposed to kill. With its inverted gull wings and massive propeller, it looked like something torn from a fever dream. The Japanese called it whistling death because of the sound it made diving through the clouds. Allied pilots called it the ensign eliminator because it killed more student pilots in training than the enemy did in combat. It was fast, brutal, and unforgiving. It demanded respect. And on that morning over Guadalcanal, James Swett gave it everything he had. The mission briefing had been simple. A formation of Japanese bombers and fighters was heading toward the Allied airstrip at Henderson Field. Intelligence reported at least 20 aircraft inbound. Swett's squadron scrambled with only 4 Corsairs. The math didn't favor them. But wars are not won by math. They are won by men who refuse to calculate the odds. Swett climbed to 15,000 feet and waited. The sky was silent. The ocean below stretched endlessly, blue and indifferent. Then he saw them. Mitsubishi A6M Zeros. 12 of them, escorting a line of bombers like wolves guarding a kill. The Zero was a legend. Lightweight, agile, capable of outmaneuvering almost anything the Allies flew in the early years of the war. Powered by the Nakajima Sakae radial engine, it could turn inside a circle tighter than a wedding ring. But it had one fatal flaw: no armor, no self-sealing fuel tanks. One good burst, and it burned like paper. The Corsair, on the other hand, was built like a tank. It could take damage and keep flying. It could dive faster than anything in the Pacific theater, and in the hands of a pilot who understood its strengths, it was unstoppable. Swett rolled inverted and dove. The Corsair screamed toward the formation, the wind howling over the wings. His finger hovered over the trigger. 6 Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns sat ready in the wings, loaded with incendiary rounds. He picked his target. A Zero on the outer edge of the formation. He fired. The tracers stitched across the sky and found metal. The Zero's wing sheared off and it spun into the ocean. No parachute. He didn't watch it fall. He was already turning toward the next one. The dogfight became a blur of motion and sound. The roar of the engine, the chatter of gunfire, the sharp smell of burnt powder in the cockpit. Swett's Corsair twisted and climbed and dove, chasing Zeros through the clouds. One after another, they fell. He lost count. His ammunition counter spun lower. His fuel gauge dropped into the red. And then, on his 7th kill, something went wrong. A Zero he thought was dead fired one last desperate burst. Rounds punched through the Corsair's oil cooler. Black smoke poured from the engine cowling. The temperature gauge spiked. The controls grew sluggish. He knew what that meant. He was going down. He tried to make it back to Henderson Field, but the Corsair was dying beneath him. Flames licked out from under the cowling. The cockpit filled with smoke. He could barely see. The altimeter unwound. 2,000 feet. 1,000. 500. He had no choice. He aimed for the water and pulled the stick back one last time. The Corsair hit the surface hard, skipped once, and plunged nose first into the Pacific. Swett kicked free from the sinking aircraft and swam. His Mae West life jacket kept him afloat. He watched his Corsair disappear beneath the waves, trailing bubbles and oil. Then he floated alone in the silence, surrounded by the wreckage of war. A patrol boat picked him up an hour later. He was awarded the Medal of Honor. But when the medics examined him, they found something no one expected. Lodged in the frame of his parachute harness, less than an inch from his spine, was a 7.7mm round. It had passed through the back of his seat during the fight. He never felt it. He never knew how close death had come. And when he saw it, extracted and placed in his palm like a dark secret, James Swett closed his fist around it and said nothing. Some things, he learned, are too close to speak about. But that was only the beginning, because 6 months later, over the skies of Rabaul, another pilot would climb into another Corsair, and what he would see up there, alone in the clouds, would change everything he thought he knew about the war. August 17, 1943. Rabaul, New Britain. Captain Robert Hanson did not believe in ghosts, but at 23,000 feet over the volcanic peaks of Rabaul, he saw something that made him question everything. It was 3 in the afternoon. The sun hung low and blood orange over the Pacific. His F4U Corsair, engine number 55822, droned steadily through thin air. Below him, the Japanese base at Rabaul smoldered from an earlier bombing run. Smoke rose in thick columns. And then, out of nowhere, a formation appeared. 6 zeros, flying in perfect diamond formation. Except they weren't attacking. They were just there. Silent. Drifting. Like shadows burned into the sky. Hanson keyed his radio. Nothing. Static. He blinked hard, rubbed his eyes through his goggles. The zeros were still there. He checked his instruments. Oxygen? Good. Fuel? Good. Engine temperature? Normal. He rolled his Corsair to get a better angle. The zeros didn't react, didn't break formation, didn't dive or climb. They just floated, suspended in the amber light, wings perfectly level. Hanson felt his heartbeat slow. This wasn't right. He'd flown 54 combat missions. He knew what a zero looked like. He knew how they moved. But these were different. They looked old, faded, like photographs left too long in the sun. He armed his guns, 6 Brownings, hot and ready. He closed the distance, 500 yards, 300, 200. Still no movement. The lead zero's canopy was empty. No pilot. Hanson's breath caught. He flew alongside them, close enough to see the details. The paint was scorched, bullet holes stitched across the fuselages, and on the tail of the lead aircraft, he saw it. A red rising sun, half burned away, and beneath it, painted in faded kanji, a name. Yamamoto's honor. Hanson knew that name. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor. He had been killed 5 months earlier, his bomber shot down over Bougainville. His death was supposed to be the turning point, the beginning of the end for Japan's air superiority. And yet, here was his squadron, flying, empty. Hanson's radio crackled suddenly, sharp and loud. A voice came through, Japanese. A woman's voice, singing softly. A lullaby. Hanson yanked his headset off. His hands shook. He looked back at the formation. They were fading now, dissolving into the clouds like smoke. One by one, they vanished. And then they were gone. Hanson was alone again. The sky was empty. The sun was setting. And he realized, with a cold certainty that settled in his chest like lead, that he had just seen the war as it truly was. Not a clash of nations or ideologies, but a graveyard, a sky filled with the restless dead. He turned his Corsair toward home and never spoke of it, not in the debrief, not in his reports, not to his squadron mates. He flew 26 more missions. He shot down 25 enemy aircraft and became one of the Marine Corps' top aces. And on February 3, 1944, over Rabaul again, Robert Hanson's Corsair was hit by ground fire. He crashed into the jungle and was never recovered. His body was never found. Some say he's still up there, flying loops over the volcano, chasing ghosts he can't quite catch. But the Corsair lived on. By the end of the war, it had proven itself the superior aircraft. It shot down over 2,140 enemy planes with an astonishing kill ratio of 11-1. The Zero, once feared and untouchable, became prey. The tables had turned, the hunters became the hunted, and the Pacific, once red with fire and blood, slowly turned blue again. Yet those who flew the Corsair knew the truth. They knew what it cost: the sleepless nights, the empty chairs at breakfast, the parachutes with holes in them, the voices on the radio that never answered back. They knew that every victory was built on loss, that every kill was a life extinguished, and that somewhere in the cold silence above the clouds, the ghosts of both sides flew together. Zeros and Corsairs, Japanese and American, boys who never got to be men. All of them circling, all of them waiting, all of them wondering if any of it mattered. The Corsair was retired in 1953, but you can still hear it sometimes on quiet mornings near old airfields, a distant rumble, a whistling dive, the sound of history refusing to be forgotten. And if you listen closely, beneath the engine roar, you might hear something else. A woman singing, a lullaby, a song for the lost, a song for the dead, a song for the sky that remembers everything.